She woke up in the middle of a dream, or maybe it was the dream that woke her up. Either way, she found herself in a place that was not her room, not her world, not anything she had known. The air shimmered as though heat hung in it, but she felt no warmth, only a calm coolness like the air before dawn. She stood barefoot on soft grass that swayed lightly, even though there was no wind. Trees stood like sentinels around her, their leaves whispering secrets in a language her heart almost understood. Everything felt too vivid to be a dream, yet too strange to be real. She looked down and found her hands glowing faintly, not with fire, but with a soft light that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her name, what was it again? It slipped away like a dream you chase upon waking. She remembered falling asleep in her bed, the ordinary comfort of a blanket, the familiar creaks of a ceiling fan. But this was something else. She touched the bark of a tree and felt it breathe beneath her palm. The stars above her moved slowly, like they had a will of their own. A moon, too large to be real, hung low on the horizon, stained blue and gold, casting shadows that shifted even when nothing moved. In the distance, she heard music. Not like any song she knew, but something older, deeper. It came from nowhere and everywhere, echoing through the air, stirring memories she never lived. Her feet began to walk, not because she willed them to, but because something inside her already knew the path. It wasn't a trail she could see, but a direction she felt, like gravity pulling her not down but forward. She walked for what felt like hours or seconds. Time didn't seem to care much for rules here. Along the way, she saw things that should have frightened her. A man with no face watering glowing flowers, a black cat with wings perched atop a cloud that hovered inches above the ground, a river that flowed upward into the sky. Yet none of it felt wrong. It was as if this world obeyed a different truth, and her body had quickly aligned with it. She passed a woman sitting in a circle of candles. The woman looked up, her eyes mirror-like, showing not her reflection but something deeper, an image of the girl as a child, laughing, then as an old woman, crying. The girl paused. "Who am I?" she asked. The woman only smiled and whispered, "You are the one who chose to wake." The words made no sense, and yet they rang true. She wanted to ask more, but the music called her again, stronger now. She continued walking, until she reached a vast lake that glowed as though filled with liquid stars. There was no boat, no bridge, but she stepped into the water without hesitation. It didn't soak her feet. Instead, it held her like glass, and she walked across it with perfect ease. Halfway across, she saw her reflection, or rather, a version of herself staring back. But the reflection spoke, mouth moving independently. "You were never meant to sleep forever," it said. "Then what was I waiting for?" "You were waiting to remember." The girl felt tears begin to form, though she couldn't explain why. She walked to the other side, where a forest of silver trees stretched far and wide. Every tree held hundreds of tiny orbs, glowing faintly, each one pulsing like a heart. She reached out to touch one, and was instantly flooded with memory. Not hers. Lives lived by others. One orb showed a woman losing her child, another a boy finding his voice for the first time, another a man forgiving someone after decades of silence. Each orb held a life's turning point, the kind of moment that shifted something permanent inside. As she stepped deeper into the forest, she began to hear whispers again, but now they spoke her name. She remembered it suddenly, a whisper inside her mind like the softest breeze. Her name was Lyra. She hadn't spoken it aloud since she arrived, maybe hadn't remembered it until now, but there it was, waiting for her like a forgotten song. She said it out loud, and the trees shimmered. The ground pulsed gently. A pathway lit up before her, golden and humming. She followed the path, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It led her to a clearing where a throne of roots and stone stood. No one sat upon it. As she approached, she saw a crown resting on its seat. Nothing ornate, just woven from vines and feathers, moonlight glinting from it faintly. "You left this behind," a voice said. She turned and saw the same woman from before, now standing beside her. "Why would I wear a crown?" Lyra asked. "Because you are the dreamer. I thought I was the one dreaming." "No," said the woman. "You are the dream." Lyra's mind spun, but everything began to click. This world hadn't been born from her sleep. It had been waiting for her return. Every strange moment, every whisper, every unreal sight, they weren't illusions, they were invitations. Her waking in this place wasn't an accident, it was a homecoming. She reached out and touched the crown. It was warm. Her hand stopped glowing, and the crown began to shimmer in return. She placed it on her head, and the air shifted. Suddenly, the sky cracked open, not in violence, but like a curtain being drawn. Light spilled through, the kind of light you feel before you see. Lyra looked up and saw not another world, but many, layered like glass panes, each slightly askew, shimmering with people, places, stories. She could see versions of herself in some, and none in others. She realized now, this dreamscape wasn't separate from life. It was life's mirror, its soul, its source. She sat on the throne. It felt familiar. She breathed in, and the trees breathed with her. She raised a hand, and the stars shifted. She closed her eyes and heard a billion voices, each one a dreamer like her, lost in sleep or drifting in search of themselves. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't only Lyra anymore. She was the girl who woke up in the dream. And now, she remembered what she was meant to do. She stood from the throne, and the ground beneath her hummed, as if thanking her. She walked back the way she came, but the world had changed. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a place of origin, of purpose. Every tree she passed bowed slightly. The woman with mirror eyes watched her with quiet pride. The cat with wings meowed once, then vanished. The music still played, but now it came from within her. She returned to the place where she had first awoken, but it was no longer strange. It was sacred. The stars above danced in her honor. The moon leaned low, and as she reached toward it, it became a door. A silver arch opened in the sky, and through it, she could see the world she had left behind, her bed, her ceiling fan, the faint sound of night traffic outside. She turned back for a moment, hesitant. If I go back, will I forget again? The wind answered her with silence. She looked at her hands. No more glow, just skin, soft and real. But something inside her pulsed stronger than before. She wasn't just a dreamer now. She was a guardian of dreams, a messenger from that other place. She stepped through the arch. The girl woke up in her bed. For a moment, she lay still, feeling the fabric, the air, the ache of something vast and beautiful just beyond memory. She sat up. Her room was quiet. Her phone buzzed with messages. Her books lay scattered. Everything was normal. Yet, when she looked into the mirror, she saw something new. Not her reflection, but a flicker, like a crown, like stars. Faint but real. She smiled, because somewhere deep inside, she hadn't forgotten. She was the girl who woke up in the dream, and she had brought a piece of it back. She rose from the bed with a quiet certainty that hadn't been there before. The room around her felt different, not in appearance, but in weight, like she was somehow both more present and more distant from it all. The ticking clock on her desk, the soft hum of the fan, even the way the sunlight pushed through the curtains, all of it seemed wrapped in a veil she had once looked through but now saw beyond. She wasn't just awake, she was aware. As she moved through the house that morning, everything responded to her differently. The floor creaked beneath her feet like an old friend greeting her. The water that flowed from the faucet seemed to ripple in patterns she could almost understand. Even the silence between her parents' murmured conversation at the breakfast table carried a texture she'd never noticed before. It was as if the world recognized her, recognized what she had become. And she did not speak of it. How could she? What words could hold what she had seen? Who would believe her if she said she had walked across a lake of stars or heard a forest speak her name? Instead, she sat quietly, watching, listening, feeling the difference inside her. She started to see it in others too, not fully but flickers. A girl on the bus, staring at the window with tears in her eyes and a notebook clutched tight to her chest. A street vendor whose hands moved over his fruit like he was sculpting more than slicing. A boy who danced alone in a back alley, his movements guided by something no music could match. They didn't know yet, but she could see it now. Some people were close. Close to waking. She remembered the orbs in the forest, the lives she'd seen, the truths that had echoed through her being. She understood now that this world, the so-called real world, was not separate from that dream realm. It was the skin of it, the surface. And just beneath, if one looked carefully, patiently, one could find the dream again, alive and pulsing like a heart buried in the earth. The days moved forward, and Lyra changed in small ways. She began to paint, though she had never thought of herself as an artist. But her hands knew how. The moment she touched the brush to canvas, shapes from the other world formed themselves, not deliberately, but instinctively, moons that bled gold, trees with hands instead of leaves, lakes that rose like mountains. People who saw her work said they were beautiful, haunting, strange. Some felt unsettled, others moved to tears. But no one could look away. It wasn't talent, it was memory taking form. At night, she dreamed differently. Not the wandering, chaotic dreams of before, but doors. Always doors. Some she passed through, some she only touched. Each time, she came back with something small, a symbol, a phrase, a scent. She started writing them down, page after page of cryptic poetry and symbols. She didn't know why, but it felt like planting seeds for something yet to bloom. She stopped fearing being alone. Silence became her companion, not her enemy. In that silence, she would close her eyes and listen, not with ears, but with her whole being. And sometimes, when she was very still, she heard it again, the music from the dream. Faint, like an echo from a mountain across the sea, but still there, still calling. One evening, walking home under the heavy glow of a setting sun, she passed an old man sitting by a fountain. His eyes locked onto hers, and he said nothing. But he nodded, slow, knowing, and she felt something shift in her again. A recognition. There were others. Not many, but she wasn't alone. She began leaving small messages in strange places, a folded note under a park bench, a chalk drawing behind a school building, a short poem etched on the bark of a tree. All messages that wouldn't make sense to most, but maybe, just maybe, someone else might understand. Someone who was starting to wake. Because that was her role now, not to escape the world, but to connect the worlds. To be a thread, invisible but strong, linking the waking and the dreaming. A messenger, as the woman had said. The dreamer who remembered. Months passed. The feeling of the dream didn't fade, it deepened. It stopped being something she returned to and started being something she carried. Like a lantern lit inside her chest. People began to come to her without knowing why. They'd sit beside her on benches, in libraries, on buses, and share pieces of their lives. Strangers told her their stories as if they'd waited years to do so. Some would cry, some would laugh, some would say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." But she always listened, not with pity, but with presence. And then one night, she saw a door again in her dream, but this time it was not for her. A boy stood beside it, trembling. He looked no older than 10, but the sorrow in his eyes was ancient. She walked up to him and gently took his hand. "It's okay," she said. "You can open it." He looked up at her. "What if I forget?" "You won't," she said, "because I'll remember for you." He opened the door, and light poured out, swallowing him whole. When she awoke the next morning, she didn't cry. She smiled. Somewhere in the world, a child had woken, not from a dream, but into one. Into this strange, painful, beautiful world, with a little more light than before. That's how it began. Quietly, with one child, then another, then more. She saw it in their eyes, new clarity, new courage, new creativity. She wasn't guiding them. She wasn't a teacher or a prophet. She was just the one who remembered first. And now, she helped others remember. Lyra lived a full life. Not the kind written about in history books, but one remembered in smaller ways. In the murals she painted on forgotten city walls. In the poems tucked into strangers' pockets. In the kindnesses that rippled outward from those she touched. Her name didn't become legend, but her light did. And even when her time came, when her hair turned silver and her breath grew shallow, she did not fear sleep. Because she knew the truth, that waking and dreaming were never opposites. That the dream was not an escape, it was a return. That every heartbeat was a thread back to the throne beneath the silver trees. And that the girl who had once woken up in the dream never truly left it. She simply brought it home. She lay on her bed, frail now, her body slower but her spirit more alive than ever. The world had changed around her, but not in the ways people often measure. No towering cities had been built because of her. No wars were ended in her name. But something quieter had taken root. A subtle shift in the way people looked at each other. A softness returning to the eyes of children. A glimmer of depth behind a smile. And those who had met her, even for a moment, found themselves remembering dreams they thought they'd forgotten. They found courage to change, to create, to begin again. They found doors in their sleep that led to forests, to lakes of stars, to their true names. She had spent a lifetime guiding people without ever drawing attention to herself. That had never been the goal. The dream had never asked for fame. It had asked for remembrance. She drifted between sleep and waking, though by now she could hardly tell the difference. Each time her eyes closed, she was back among the stars, walking through skies where gravity obeyed memory instead of mass. Sometimes she returned to the forest with the orbs, sitting beside them as they flickered, each one a person she had helped awaken. And sometimes, in her dreams, children ran up to her and hugged her without reason, laughing and radiant, as though they had known her forever. And maybe they had. After all, in the realm of dreams, time wasn't a line. It was a field. All moments bloomed at once. One night, she felt it, the call. It wasn't a sound or a vision, but a knowing that wrapped gently around her chest and whispered its time. She didn't resist. She let the world around her dim, not with sadness, but with a quiet peace. Her last breath didn't feel like an ending. It felt like returning. In the dream once more, she stood at the edge of the lake of stars. But now it was larger, clearer. She saw her reflection again, but this time, she was not alone in it. Dozens, hundreds of faces appeared beside hers. People she'd guided, spoken to, touched in passing. The child who had opened the door. The girl on the bus. The old man by the fountain. They were all there, not behind her, but beside her as equals. The forest greeted her like a long-lost friend. The trees swayed with joy, the orbs brighter than ever before. The throne waited. She approached, not as the girl who had once woken in the dream, but as the woman who had lived it fully, carried it across decades, and planted its seeds in the waking world. As she sat once more, the sky split open, just like before, but now what lay beyond wasn't layered glass or shifting realities. It was one vast, unified light, not blinding but embracing. And from its stepped figures, the mirror-eyed woman was among them, smiling. The winged cat fluttered down from a tree branch. The faceless man, who once watered glowing flowers, now held a single golden blossom in his hands. "You remembered," the woman said. "I did. And you helped others remember." Lyra nodded. "It was never just for me, was it?" "No," the woman whispered. "But it always starts with one." The sky thundered softly, like a deep breath exhaled. The world around them shimmered, and Lyra stood. Her crown returned to her brow, made now not of vines and feathers, but of threads, each one a connection she had made, each one a life changed. She wasn't returning to the throne this time. She was moving beyond it. The mirror-eyed woman extended a hand. "Are you ready?" Lyra didn't need to answer. Together, they stepped forward into the light. What happened after that cannot be explained with language. There are no words for how a soul returns to its source. No way to measure the shape of a life once it folds back into the dream that bore it. But in the world she left behind, the signs remained. A little girl in a small village picked up a paintbrush one day and painted a lake of stars without ever having seen one. She called it home. A quiet man who worked as a janitor began writing poems during his breaks, describing trees with hands and moons that bleed gold. One of them went viral, and he never knew why. A cat with unusually intelligent eyes began visiting children in their sleep, guiding them to doors. And somewhere, deep in a forest that no map could find, trees began to glow faintly, their trunks etched with symbols no one remembered learning. But those who walked there, even once, felt changed. Time passed, and Lyra's name faded from memory, as all names eventually do. But her presence did not. People spoke of a feeling, a lightness in dreams, a new kind of stillness in their minds when they closed their eyes. Psychologists called it lucid expansion. Artists called it the wellspring. Children simply called it the knowing. In a small museum built long after her passing, someone displayed one of Lyra's original paintings. No one knew its history, but visitors would often stop and stare at it for long minutes, unable to explain why tears welled in their eyes. The painting was untitled, but beneath it, someone once wrote in pencil. She was the girl who woke up in the dream. And then she helped the dream wake up in all of us. And perhaps that is the truest ending. Not a final page, not a closed book, but a ripple spreading endlessly outward. Because Lyra did not return to dust. She returned to wonder, to the glowing heart of the dream that had never been separate from reality at all. In another part of the world, a teenage boy sat alone on his rooftop at midnight, staring at the stars. He didn't know why, but something about them made him cry. He wiped his tears and laughed without knowing the reason. He fell asleep there, the cool wind wrapping around him like a story. That night, he dreamed of a throne made of stone and roots, a crown of threads, a girl with soft eyes who said nothing, only smiled. And when he woke, he remembered. Just a little. But that was enough. Because remembering, even a little, was how the next dream began. He awoke just before dawn, heart still thudding from the dream. It had been unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Not frightening, not strange in the usual dream sense, just real. So real that the weight of it pressed against his chest even as the stars outside faded into morning. He sat on the rooftop, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the dream. But he couldn't. Because it wasn't gone, it was inside him now. Alive. The image of the girl with soft eyes and the crown of threads lingered. She hadn't spoken, but something in her gaze had said everything. It was as if she had seen him. Not just his face, but his truth. And in her silence, there was an invitation. And when he woke, he remembered. Just a little. But that was enough. Because remembering, even a little, was how the next dream began. He awoke just before dawn, heart still thudding from the dream. It had been unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Not frightening, not strange in the usual dream sense, just real. So real that the weight of it pressed against his chest even as the stars outside faded into morning. He sat on the rooftop, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the dream. But he couldn't. Because it wasn't gone, it was inside him now. Alive. The image of the girl with soft eyes and the crown of threads lingered. She hadn't spoken, but something in her gaze had said everything. It was as if she had seen him. Not just his face, but his truth. And in her silence, there was an invitation. He didn't know her name, but he remembered how it felt standing near her. Safe. Awake. Like all the pieces of himself he'd lost in the chaos of life had returned without asking. He didn't know it yet, but her name had been Lyra, and her dream was not over. And somewhere deeper, in the dream realm itself, the trees began to grow taller. The orbs glowed brighter. The throne, once empty, began to pulse softly, as if waiting. The forest was watching, listening. For every person who remembered, the dream became stronger. But it wasn't just a return. It was a becoming. Back on the rooftop, the boy, his name was Idris, continued to dream. But his dreams were shifting. Now he saw people, strangers, walking beside him in the glowing forest. He saw the river flowing upward, the lake of stars, the cat with wings circling above him. He saw the throne in the distance, and the woman who sat upon it. Sometimes, she would rise and walk with him, her presence calm and warm, like the space between heartbeats. And then one night, she spoke. "You've done well." "Who are you?" he asked. "I was like you," she replied. "I woke up once. Long ago. I helped others remember. And now it's your turn." "But why me?" "Because you listened." Idris tried to hold on to the dream, but it faded faster than usual. When he woke, he found his notebook open to a page he didn't remember writing. A single sentence. The dream chooses those who are ready to remember. He closed the book. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. In the years that followed, the world didn't change in ways headlines reported. But those who watched closely noticed patterns. Art became deeper, more symbolic. Music started to carry layers of meaning people couldn't explain. A new generation of children began to speak of stars and forests and old memories they had no way of knowing. And though no one said her name, Lyra was in all of it. She had become more than the girl who woke up in the dream. She had become the root system beneath 1,000 lives, the breath behind 1,000 words, the silence before 1,000 awakenings. And then, one final ripple. A young girl named Alina, 16 years old, lonely, often quiet, picked up a book in an old store. She didn't know why. It was blank, except for one sentence on the first page. Asterisk, she was the girl who woke up in the dream. And now you must decide if you will do the same. Asterisk. Alina stared at the words. And she smiled, because something inside her had already begun to stir. And far away, beneath the dreaming sky, the throne pulsed once more. The dream was alive. The dream was expanding. And soon, it would awaken the world. Alina held the book close to her chest and stepped out of the shop, heart racing in that peculiar way. Not fear, not excitement, but a trembling anticipation, like she was standing on the edge of something vast. She didn't know where she was going, not exactly. But her feet carried her with strange confidence, as if they'd walked this path 100 times in dreams she hadn't remembered until now. That night, when the world outside her window dissolved into sleep, Alina dreamed. But this time, she didn't just see the glowing forest. She entered it. The air shimmered the way starlight might if it could hum. Trees reached high into an endless night sky that pulsed like a living canvas. The lake of stars rippled calmly nearby, and when she stepped onto its surface, the water held her weight like it had been waiting for her. As she crossed, Alina noticed something beautiful. She was not alone. Along the shore and scattered between the silver trees were others. Children, elders, strangers from distant lands, each walking in awe, drawn by something invisible and magnetic. Some held hands, others walked in silence, but all of them moved forward, toward the throne. Alina's breath caught as she saw it for the first time. The throne of roots and stone now stood not empty, not alone but surrounded. Not by worshippers, not by followers, but by keepers. People who had remembered. People who had once woken in the dream and had carried it back into their world. Idris was there. So was Maria from the hospital, the boy who painted the winged cat, the blind musician. Faces she didn't know, but somehow recognized, as though their souls had always known each other. And sitting on the throne was no longer just Lyra. The throne had changed. It had become many, circles of roots and light, each connected, each glowing faintly, filled now with souls who remembered not just who they were, but what the dream truly was. Alina stepped forward. No one stopped her. No voice told her what to do. She simply knew. She reached toward an empty space between two thrones, and as her fingers grazed the air, a new seed of woven roots and starlight bloomed from the ground. The forest acknowledged her with a hush. The stars paused in their dance, and Alina sat. The dream welcomed her, not with applause or praise, but with stillness. A deep, eternal stillness that said, "You are part of us now." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was awake, back in her room. The book lay on her desk, but it was no longer blank. Its pages were now filled with the stories of others. Some were hers, some were Lyra's, some were waiting to be written. Outside her window, morning bloomed, soft and golden. But Alina no longer saw the world as she had before. She saw threads, connecting people, places, ideas. Threads of memory, of kindness, of longing. She saw a classmate with sorrow hidden behind loud laughter. She saw a neighbor who hummed songs from her youth when no one was listening. She saw children drawing stars on sidewalks with chalk unprompted. And she knew, deep in her bones, that she was now a keeper of the dream. That all of them were. The dream was no longer something you entered. It was something you lived. A place of memory and imagination that seeped into music, into art, into gentle glances between strangers on buses. It was in lullabies, in unsent letters, in the silence before someone says, "I love you" for the first time. And in the centuries that followed, though names like Lyra and Idris and Alina faded from written memory, their presence only deepened. Somewhere in every era, a child always dreamed of a glowing forest. A musician always wrote a song they didn't understand. A young girl always found a blank book with one line. Asterisk, she was the girl who woke up in the dream. And now you must decide if you will do the same. Asterisk. And so it continues. Not a story with an ending, but a dream that never dies. Because once someone remembers, truly remembers, the dream begins again, and again, and again, forever.